book ka he will give.
Okay, so we are reading the Celestine Prophecy. We are in chapter 2, the longer now, and we are on page 33 of the book and page 17 of the PDF.
Thank you.
Shimangla, you're on.
Yeah. Once I arrived in Peru, he continued, I met a couple of people who confirmed the manuscript's existence, yet seemed scared to death to talk much about it. They said the government had gone a little loco and was making physical threats against anyone who had copies or dispersed information.
So, as we discussed yesterday, the government was very, very upset about this manuscript coming out because the church was totally connected with the government and the church was getting a little apprehensive about the manuscript.
His face turned serious. That made me nervous. But later, a waiter at my hotel told me about a priest he knew who often spoke of the manuscript. The waiter said the priest was trying to fight the government's effort to suppress the artifact. I couldn't resist going to a private dwelling where this priest supposedly spent most of his time. I must have looked surprised because Dobson asked, What's wrong? My friend, I replied, the one who told me about the manuscript, learned what she knew from a priest. He wouldn't give his name, but she talked with him once about the first insight. She was scheduled to meet with him again and he never showed up. It may have been the same man, Dobson said, because I couldn't find him either. The house was locked up and looked deserted. You never saw him? No, but I decided to look around. There was an old storage building in the back that was open, and for some reason I decided to explore inside. Behind some trash under a loose board in the wall, I found translations of the first and second insights. He looked at me knowingly. You just happened to find them? I asked. Yes. Did you bring the insights with you on this trip? He shook his head. No, I decided to study them thoroughly and then leave them with some of my colleagues. Could you give me a summary of the second insight? I asked. There was a long pause when then Dobson smiled and nodded. I guess that's why we're here.
So, again, coincidence, right? Now he's already got the first insight, and naturally now he's looking for the second insight. And here he finds a person who has already who knows about the second insight, and that person also found it very, very coincidentally. He did not really know that he was looking for it. Yes, Renuji? Renuji, you have a question? Your hand is raised.
No, Bhaiya, that was earlier when we were discussing.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't put it down. I put it down.
The second insight, he said, puts our current awareness into a longer historical perspective. After all, when the decade of the 90s is over, we'll be finishing up not only the 20th century, but a 1,000-year period of history as well. We'll be completing the entire second millennium. Before we in the West can understand where we are and what is going to occur next, we must understand what has really been happening during this current 1,000-year period. What does the manuscript say exactly? I asked. It says that at the close of the second millennium, that's now, we will be able to see that entire period of history as a whole, and we will identify a particular preoccupation that developed during the later half of this millennium in what has been called the modern age. Our awareness of the coincidences today represents a kind of awakening from this preoccupation. What's the preoccupation? I asked. He gave me a mischievous half smile. Are you ready to relive the millennium? Sure. Tell me about it. It's not enough for me to tell you about it.
Okay,
Remember
so
what I
over
said.
here, one line, our awareness of coincidences today represents a kind of awakening from this preoccupation of how we were occupied during the last millennium. So shifts in consciousness are taking place.
It's not enough for me to tell you about it. Remember what I said before. To understand history, you must grasp how your everyday view of the world developed, how it was created by the reality of the people who lived before you. It took 1,000 years to evolve the modern way of looking at things and to really understand where you are today. You must take yourself back to the year 1000 and then move forward through the entire millennium experientially, as though you actually lived through the whole period yourself in a single lifetime.
So it's like as if we are in a dream, okay, and we are reliving in our entire life. So now what he's saying is that we are going to relive the entire millennium.
How do I do that? I'll guide you through it. I hesitated for a moment, glancing out the window at the land formations far below. Time was already beginning to feel different. I'll try, I said finally. Okay, he replied. Imagine yourself being alive in the year 1000 in what we have called the Middle Ages. The first thing you must understand is that the reality of this time is being defined by the powerful churchmen of the Christian church. Because of their position, these men hold great influence over the minds of the populace, and the world these churchmen describe as real is above all spiritual. They are creating a reality which places their idea about God's plan for mankind at the very center of life.
So again, this is being taught from the European perspective, okay, where the church actually held a lot of sway and they were really, really connected with all the powers that were there.
Visualize this, he continued. You find yourself in the class of your father, essentially peasant or aristocrat, and you know that you will always be confined to this class. But regardless of which class you're in or the particular work that you do, you soon realize that social position is secondary to the spiritual reality of life as defined by the churchmen.
So the churchmen were above all the other people, okay. So the churchmen actually had the rule. The churchmen could actually go and prosecute even the prince of the realm because they had that much of power.
Life is about passing a spiritual test. You discover the churchmen explain that God has placed mankind at the center of his universe, surrounded by the entire cosmos, for one solitary purpose to win or lose salvation. And in this trial, you must correctly choose between two opposing forces, the force of God and the lurking temptations of the devil.
So at that time, Galileo hadn't said what that the sun was the center of our solar system. Okay, according to the church, man and the earth was the center of the entire universe, and man had everything going for him, and he had only two choices: either be good or be bad. But the be good was based on the belief system of the church. So if you didn't follow the belief system of the church, you were the devil, which is what Andrew Austin was saying um, uh, in his talk on Gothic magic. That if I mean for the churchmen, our Hindu religion was the religion of a devil. Okay, it was a religion of a devil. So the point becomes that anything that was opposing the church was a big problem.
But understand that you don't face this contest alone, he continued. In fact, as a mere individual, you aren't qualified to determine your status in this regard. This is the province of the churchmen.
So now
They
again,
are there.
the churchmen determined what perspective or where you were operating from, whether you were a bad man or were you were a good man.
They are there to interpret the scriptures and to tell you every step of the way, whether you are in accordance with God or whether you are being duped by Satan.
So again,
If you follow their instructions, you are assured that a rewarding afterlife will follow.
so
But if you
again,
fail,
Shimangla, you got two systems on?
no, no,
It's excellent. You'll have to, yeah. So now what is happening over here? The scriptures, that means the Bible. So the Bible is the word of God and you have to follow the Bible. There is no other way. So it's either the Bible or the highway. And if you do not follow their instructions, then you're going to hell. You're not going to heaven. So the idea was control. The church wanted to control everything.
but if you fail to heed the course they prescribe, then well, there is excommunication and certain damnation.
So now the power that they held was that if you did not follow the lead, you would be excommunicated from society. And if you were excommunicated from society, then you were damned to hell because you were not in the path to go to heaven.
Dobson looked at me intensely. The manuscript says that the important thing to understand here is that every aspect of the medieval world is defined in otherworldly terms. All the phenomena of life, from the chance thunderstorm or earthquake to the success of crops or the death of a loved one, is defined either as the will of God or as the malice of the devil. There is no concept of weather or geological forces or horticulture or disease. All that comes later. For now, you completely believe the churchmen. The world you take for granted operates solely by spiritual means.
So if you are good, good things will happen to you. If anything bad has happened to you, that means you are bad. So there is no question of what your abilities are or what you can do or not. If something bad happens to you, you're bad. If something good happens to you, you're good. And the churchmen decided whether you're good or bad.
He stopped talking and looked at me. Are you there? Yes, I can see that reality. Well, imagine that reality now beginning to break down. What do you mean? The medieval worldview, your worldview, begins to fall apart in the 14th and 15th centuries. First, you notice certain improprieties on the part of the churchmen themselves, secretly violating their vows of chastity, for example, or taking gratuities to look the other way when governmental officials violate scriptural laws.
So again, the people who lead, they live in glass houses. So they have to be very clear about what they are doing. Now, if they say that, we are perfect and you have to be perfect if you don't listen to us, then naturally they are saying that we are perfect. And if they make mistakes, then naturally it becomes a problem. So people start thinking that what is happening? If they are doing this, then where are they coming from? So a shift in conscious awareness has started to take place.
These improprieties alarm you because these churchmen hold themselves to be the only connection between yourself and God. Remember, they are the only interpreters of the scriptures, the sole arbitrators of your salvation.
So naturally, if I am dependent on them for salvation and they are behaving in ways that they themselves say is going to lead to damnation, then who am I following? That becomes the big question mark.
Suddenly, you are in the midst of an outright rebellion, a group led by Martin Luther is calling for a complete break from papal Christianity. The churchmen are corrupt, they say, demanding an end to the churchman's reign over the minds of the people. New churches are being formed based on the idea that each person should be able to have access to the scriptures personally and to interpret them as they wish with no middlemen.
Okay, so now what happens? This happened even in our culture where the Brahmins wanted to maintain control over everything. Then naturally there was a distinction which was got created with Ramcharitramanas actually, where it became localized. People could actually read for themselves. So we don't want an interpreter. We are going to read it for ourselves. So I can find my own path. I don't have to depend on the churchmen to guide me on my path.
As you watch in disbelief, the rebellion succeeds. The churchmen begin to lose. For centuries, these men defined reality, and now, before your eyes, they are losing their credibility. Consequently, the whole world is being thrown into question. The clear consensus about the nature of the universe and about humankind's purpose here, based as it was on the churchman's description, is collapsing, leaving you and all other humans in Western culture in a very precarious place.
So now, as the hold of the church started to fall, naturally everyone is going in their own way. So a little bit of chaos started to develop because everyone is saying their own thing, and no one knows. There is no one set niyam. Okay, things are shifting and changing.
After all, you have grown accustomed to having an authority in your life to define reality, and without that external direction, you feel confused and lost. If the churchman's description of reality and the reason for human existence is wrong, you ask, then what is right? He paused for a moment. Do you see the impact of this collapse on the people of that day? I suppose it was somewhat unsettling, I said.
So
To say
again,
the
the
least,
point the point is here that you're used to that one authority saying, okay, this is right and this is right wrong. This is black and this is white. Now suddenly that authority itself is collapsing. So naturally, lots of confusion. Now you have to find your own way. We become explorers in our own right.
to say the least, he replied, there was a tremendous upheaval. The old worldview was being challenged everywhere. In fact, by the 1600s, astronomers had proved beyond a doubt that the sun and the stars did not revolve around the earth as maintained by the church. Clearly, the earth was the only one small planet orbiting a minor sun in a galaxy that contained billions of such stars.
So again, what the church was professing was shifted. It got changed because of scientific discovery.
He leaned towards me. This is important. Mankind has lost its place at the center of God's universe. See the effect this had? Now, when you watch the weather or plants growing or someone suddenly die, what you feel is an anxious bafflement. In the past, you might have said God was responsible or the devil, but as the medieval worldview breaks down, that certainty goes with it. All the things you took for granted now need new definition, especially the nature of God and your relationship to God.
So again, that authority which laid the rules, which laid all the regulations, that authority is gone out of sync. Okay. So now you need to create your own worldview. You need to create your own definition. You need to create your own rules that you're going to be living with.
With that awareness, he went on, the modern age begins. There is a growing democratic spirit and a mass distrust of papal and royal authority. Definitions of the universe based on speculation or scriptural faith are no longer automatically accepted.
So
In
now
spite of
the question starts coming. Okay, if you want me to do something, then why do you want me to do it? Which is something all our children are also questioning. We were having certain ritualistic practices, certain things that we were doing in our religion and culture also. Now, youngsters are asking us, right, that why are we doing this? What is the reason why we are doing this? And if we do not have a proper and a scientific explanation for them, they are not going to do it anymore. So it becomes very important to understand the basis of why we are doing something. Having said that, the Vedic culture was a very, very scientific culture, and there was a scientific reason behind everything that we do. The church, I mean, I'm holding my ground over here. The church, I can't say, was totally based on scientific discovery. It was based on basically faith and a lot of control.
Definitions of the universe based on speculation or scriptural faith are no longer automatically accepted. In spite of the loss of certainty, we didn't want to risk some new group controlling our reality as the churchmen had. If you had been there, you would have participated in the creation of a new mandate for science. A
So
what?
this was the time when there was a distinction created between science and spirituality. And I'm talking
He
about the
laughed.
European area.
You would have looked out on this vast, undefined universe and you would have thought, as did the thinkers of that day, that we needed a method of consensus building, a way to systematically explore this new world of ours. And you would have called this new way of discovering reality the scientific method, which is nothing more than testing an idea about how the universe works, arriving afterward at some conclusion, and then offering this conclusion to others to see if they agree.
So again, what is this process, right? It is a process of experimentation, of indulging with yourself, of testing with yourself, seeing when you do something, what's the effect on you. Today, Ravindraji, what is he doing? When he's making a mudra, he's actually testing on himself. He's seeing how he's feeling about the mudra, and then he says that okay, this mudra will have this effect. If I'm going to someone's place to check the energy, that I'm testing the field, and over a period of time we've been able to assess that okay, if this kind of a feel is here, then this would be the result. In metaphors of movement, Andrew is calling in people to his in fact, he used to do that. He used to book a room and used to put an ad out in the newspaper that anyone with a certain illness, please come and see me. And then he used to work out the metaphors for that particular illness, and then he started wanting to get patterns which were developing over one kind of people, or people who were suffering from a certain thing. And then he came up with these basic concepts that okay, this is when this happens, this happens, when this happens, this happens. The same thing happened with aura photography with me. I think I've taken so many aura photographs of myself because I knew what I was going through. And when I'm seeing the picture, I can understand that, okay, I'm going through this and this is what the picture is coming. So, based on that, we could discover that, okay, this thing, if this symbol comes in the picture, it means this. If this symbol comes, it means this. So, this is what he's saying over here, that consensus building, a way of systematically exploring this new world of ours, which is nothing more than testing an idea about the universe works, arriving afterwards at some conclusion, and then offering this conclusion to others, and if they also see it in the same way. So that's how scientific discovery works. Today, if let us say they are discovering a new medicine, a new molecule of which will have a certain effect. So they're constantly testing what will happen, what will happen, what will happen. And then they come out that okay, in 9 out of 10 cases or 6 out of 10 cases, if this molecule is ingested, then this will be the effect. Why do you think it takes so much time to discover a vaccine or a medication which will work for coronavirus? Because it takes time to test. You cannot just give one thing. What may work for one person may not work for another person. So they have to do a broad based testing to see that okay, it's working for most of the people. many people are allergic to some medication. Why? It No medication will work for everyone en bloc. So that's why it's always a testing process.
Then he continued, you would have prepared explorers to go out into this new universe, each armed with a scientific method, and you would have given them their historic mission. Explore this place and find out how it works and what it means that we find ourselves alive here.
So again, investigation, testing, going out into the wider field to test things.
You knew you had lost your certainty about a God ruled universe, and because of that, your certainty about the nature of God Himself.
So now
But
this
you
is
felt
important. This is important because the belief system itself has taken a backseat. It has taken, there is a distinction created. Your belief system is shifting. Previously, the church was the basis of your belief system. Now that belief system has got jacked away. So now you need to create another paradigm in which you will live.
You knew you had lost your certainty about a God ruled universe, and because of that, your certainty about the nature of God Himself. But you felt you had a method, a consensus building process through which you could discover the nature of everything around you, including God, and including the true purpose of mankind's existence on the planet. So you send these explorers out to find the true nature of your situation and to report back.
So again, study, investigation. This is how discovery started taking place.
He paused and looked at me. The manuscript, he said, says that at this point we began the preoccupation from which we are awakening now. We send these explorers out to bring back a complete explanation of our existence, but because of the complexity of the universe, they weren't able to return right away.
So again, there's too much to discover. So naturally, it would take time.
What was the preoccupation? Put yourself in that time period again, he said, when the scientific method couldn't bring back a new picture of God and of mankind's purpose on the planet. The lack of certainty and meaning affected Western culture deeply. We needed something else to do until our questions were answered. Eventually, we arrived at what seemed to be a very logical solution. We looked at each other and said, well, since our explorers have not yet returned with our true spiritual situation, why not settle into this new world of ours while we are waiting? We are certainly learning enough to manipulate this new world for our own benefit. So why not work in the meantime to raise our standard of living, our sense of security in the world?
So this led to the industrial revolution. Okay, that how to make things better, how to mechanize things, how to make things easier. So that is where the mind started to work rather than only the good and evil, which was there. Either you're good or either you're evil. We started focusing on improving efficiency.
He looked at me and grinned, and that's what we did 4 centuries ago. We shook off our feeling of being lost by taking matters into our own hands by focusing on conquering the earth and using its resources to better our situation. And only now, as we approach the end of the millennium, can we see what happened. Our focus gradually became a preoccupation. We totally lost ourselves in creating a secular security, an economic security, to replace the spiritual one we had lost.
So this is also a time when democracy would start coming into the fray. That independence with collective governance.
The question of why we are alive, of what was actually going on here spiritually, was slowly pushed aside and repressed altogether.
So we shifted from a spiritual bent of operating to a totally materialistic bent of operation.
He looked at me intensely, then said, working to establish a more comfortable style of survival has grown to feel complete in and of itself as a reason to live, and we've gradually, methodically forgotten our original question. We've forgotten that we still don't know what we're surviving for.
So now, in the materialistic position, you don't know where you're going. Where you came from, you don't know. Where you're going, you don't know. Because that exploration of where you came from and where you're going is a spiritual quest. But since we all became focused on the materialistic quest of making our lives materialistically better, naturally we lost that concept of actual spiritual growth, of where we are going and where we are coming from.
Out the window, far below, I could see a large city. Judging from our flight path, I suspected it was Orlando, Florida. I was struck by the geometric outline of streets and avenues, the planned and ordered configuration of what humans had built. I looked over at Dobson. His eyes were closed and he appeared to be asleep. For an hour, he had told me more than about the second insight. Then our lunch had arrived and we had eaten, and I had told him about Charlene and why I had decided to come to Peru. Afterwards, I wanted only to gaze out at the cloud formations and consider what he had said. So, what do you think? He asked suddenly, looking sleepily over at me. Have you grasped the second insight? I'm not sure. He nodded towards the other passengers. Do you feel as if you have that the original manuscript be made public? I sent a letter to the relevant department heads within the
एक एक
Peruvian.
मिस हुआ है मिस हुआ है
इसमें
One
नहीं
second.
है.
Okay. I am
Even I
not
was.
sure. He nodded towards the other passengers. Do you feel as if you have a clearer perspective on the human world? Do you see how preoccupied everyone has been? This perspective explains a lot. How many people do you know who are obsessed with their work, who are type A or have stress related disease and who cannot slow down? They can't slow down because they've used their routine to distract themselves, to reduce life to only its practical considerations. And they do this to avoid recalling how uncertain they are about why they are alive. So, what is happening? All of us, a lot of us are stuck in that same rigmarole. Day in and day out, we are doing the same routine, we are doing the same thing, we are not doing anything new. We are stuck in that particular pattern which we are stuck to. Now, in our workshops, I always ask the people this question: when was the last time you did something new? And let me tell you, 9 out of 10 times I see blank faces because they don't remember when they did something new. And this is extremely sad because if you don't do something new, then there is no growth. So you have totally distracted yourself from the actual consideration of growth, to figure out where we are going, why are we going, to just doing what we are doing day out, day in and day out. Okay, have you find out? Is it here now? No, it's not here. The second insight extends our consciousness of historical time, he added. It shows us how to observe culture not just from the perspective of our own lifetimes, but from the perspective of the whole millennium. It relieves our preoccupation to us and so lifts us above it. You have to experience this long history. You now live in a longer now. When you look at human world now, you should be able to clearly see this obsessiveness, this intense preoccupation with economic progress. Okay, I don't know where have you found. Okay, but what's wrong with that? I protested. It's what made Western civilization great. He laughed loudly. Of course, you're right. No one is saying it's wrong. In fact, the manuscript says that the preoccupation was a necessary development, a stage in human evolution. Now, however, we've spent enough time settling into the world. It's time now to wake up from the preoccupation and reconsider our original question: what's behind life in this planet? Why are we really here? So again, the idea here in all our explorations, even when we are looking at the Gita or our scriptures also, the question is, why are we here? Who are we? Why? Who am I? That's the big question. I looked at him for a long time, then asked, do you think the other insights will explain this? Purpose. Dobson cocked his head. I think it's worth a look. I just hope no one destroys the rest of the manuscript because before we have a chance to find out. How could the Peruvian government think they could destroy an important artifact and get away with it? I asked. They would do it covertly, he explained. The official line is that the manuscript does not exist at all. So again, denial. Okay, whenever something doesn't uh, fit with our paradigm, it doesn't fit with our worldview, we can go into denial. No, it's wrong. It's not. It's not there. So you'll find people who are not connected to something. They'll say, no, it's all bullshit. It cannot work. It just cannot work. They haven't even attempted to look at what it is all about, and they reject it offline. Okay, I would think that the scientific community would be up in arms. He looked at me with an expression of resolve. We are. That's why I'm returning to Peru. I represent 10 prominent scientists, all of whom demand that the original manuscript be made public. I sent a letter to the relevant department heads within the Peruvian government telling them that I was coming and I expected cooperation. I think you've got it now, Shimanga.
Yeah, I think so too.
So now the scientific people are wanting to get about. You've gone too much ahead, Shimanga. नीचे आओ.
It's page 21.
Yeah, I was just trying to see where whether there was
It
something
was
else.
there. You had got it, and then
No,
you.
no, I know. I'm just coming to it. This, I'm not used to this computer scrolling. यही है ना?
Yeah, हाँ यही है.
One second.
यही है. Peruvian government telling them that we had decided to create a more comfortable and pleasurable life for ourselves and our children. And in a mere 400 years, our preoccupation had created a human world where all the comforts of life could now be produced. The problem was that our focused, obsessive drive to conquer nature and make ourselves more comfortable had left the natural systems of the planet polluted and on the verge of collapse. We couldn't go on this way.
So again, as we industrialize, pollution started taking over. So naturally, we are not being efficient in the way that we were using the resources of the earth to create comfort for ourselves.
Dobson was right. The second insight did make our new awareness seem inevitable. We were reaching a climax in our cultural purpose. We were accomplishing what we had collectively decided to do. And as this happened, our preoccupation was breaking down and we were waking up to something else. I could almost see the momentum of the modern age, slowing as we approached the end of the millennium. A 400-year-old obsession had been completed. We had created the means of material security, and now we seemed to be ready, poised in fact, to find out why we had done it. In the
So
faces
now
of the
as
passive,
we reach, like materialism has its end, because kitna consume kar lenge. What will you do today? Look at yourselves. If you have to buy a gift for someone, can you think of a gift that you can give to someone, especially people who are like us? It's very difficult to even find a gift to give to someone because everyone has everything literally. So what are you going to gift a person? I remember when we were growing up, एक खिलौना मिलता, एक dinky toy मिलता था. We used to be so happy with it, right? That one dinky toy. Now today you give a dinky toy to the children, they are not going to be happy with it at all, because they've got so much that that one dinky toy doesn't have any value anymore. So everyone has got too much now, which is again shifting our perspective, and that emptiness is creeping in to figure out, okay, now what are we really looking for? Why are all of us together in awareness? We are all looking for what is making us tick. We are looking for what is that expanded state. How do we connect to it? How do we grow ourselves emotionally, mentally, physically, as well as spiritually?
In the faces of the passengers around me, I could see evidence of the preoccupation, but I also thought I detected brief glimpses of awareness. How many, I wondered, had already noticed the coincidences?
Okay, so now again, the first insight, start noticing the coincidences in your life. The second insight, look at how growth has taken place and what is the shift in consciousness from spirituality to materialism and now back into spirituality. I think we can stop here because there's a break in the paragraph. Chaliye, anyone, anything? Anyone, anything to share or say? Either everyone is stunned or
Thank you.